entrepreneur, content creator, and an author and a public speaker. Ankur Warikoo, thank you so much for speaking to Blue.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I had to lay off 80 people for no fault of theirs, absolutely. And they suffered for the bad decisions that I had made as a founder. I think motivation is garbage.
So I want to start by asking you, you've written a book about money.
Yes.
This is the most recent one. And of course, you know all about making money. You've headed 4 companies, you're on the board of it. And what I want to ask you is, what is the significance of money in your life?
Money is important. And I feel, I grew up actually believing that money is not. In fact, I grew up hating money because we never had enough of it. And I almost felt like that was the reason of all of our problems. And once we had money, everything will be fixed. But we never had it, so I hated it even more. And because of which I disrespected that. And I feel that particularly in our culture, there's this nuance of don't go thinking about money because it makes you greedy, it makes you
It's the evil.
Yeah, it's the
thing,
evil thing. Like it breeds greed, it makes you indifferent towards people and so on. But what I recognized over time was money is certainly very, very important. Not because of the things it buys. It does buy things, but the far bigger role of money is to buy you your freedom. Freedom to work wherever you want to work or not work. Freedom to work with certain kind of people and not. Freedom to have the right kind of diet or to continue eating junk food. Freedom to play a certain sport or not. Freedom to choose certain professionals to help you in your career or not. Freedom to just live the life that you wish to. And if you start thinking of money as something that you get to exercise choice with, then suddenly it becomes far more important than just to buy that car or that phone or that house and whatnot. So today I use my money for that, and I wish everybody got to taste that, because then that life is absolutely brilliant.
Tell us a little bit more about that life.
That life is, so I work for less than 20 hours a week. I have a fully remote team that's spread across the country. We meet once every quarter. We have a lovely time whenever we meet. We go for really nice vacations and offsets and so on. I make passive income, so I don't have to show up every day to make the income that I do. We travel, last year I counted, we traveled for 108 days of the 365. We love traveling as a family. We love spending on experiences. At the same time, except for a house, we don't own anything else materially big. So we rent our car, and we're not fond of buying fancy things. We wear very simple clothes. We eat really good quality food, but it's not extravagant. We hardly eat out, order in, etc. Everything is home cooked.
Right.
And we just spend time on reading, on experiencing things, on traveling, and we spend a really whole lot of money in driving that agenda for our kids and for ourselves.
Right.
I love that life. I love it because it's not intense. It's very intentional. It's very deliberate. We get to experience lives with each other, be very mindful of how we're also living ours. And this is coming from somebody who spent 15 odd years building startups and was completely at the opposite end of the spectrum, which I'm sure you will also relate to. Like insane hours and your calendar is all chock-a-block and you feel pride in that.
Right.
You almost feel like, oh my God, I have no time to breathe and that's such an honorable life. And I lived that, and that was a part of my life that I don't regret at all. But I love this life as well because it's just so very different and yet very present.
Right. Ankur, money, you've just said the whole lot of freedom that it has given you, and how, you choose to sort of know what to do with your time and how to spend it. And you've done it so young. You've done it, in 15 years, you built these great startups and you've made the money. I wanted to pivot a little bit because you are an influencer. Millions of people are watching you. They buy your advice, they want to have your life, a lot of them. But not everybody can probably build 5 startups, become a millionaire, and then, sort of do what you're doing. So in this period, what would your advice be to young people who sort of look at a lot of influencers, think like by 40, if I don't have it all, right? 6-pack abs, the millions, if I'm not sort of a tick mark on each of these, my life is failing. What would your advice be to that, say, 22-year-old who's watching you saying, I want to be an Ankur Warikoo, at 30, he's done it at 40, I want it at 30?
I'd say don't aim for getting it quickly. It's wonderful to have goals, but the worst thing you can do is to put a timestamp on the goal. Have goals, and it frankly wouldn't matter when you hit them. There is not going to be any conversation when you're dying that I wish I'd got that $1 million 2 years earlier. I wish I'd bought that house 5 years earlier. I wish I'd bought that car 2 months earlier. Time will be the last of the thing you'll worry about when you hit your goal, because just the feeling of that. I'll start with the first honest admission. Not everybody should have a startup. While I know it's the very fashionable thing to do now, and in the world of Shark Tank, everyone wants to become a founder and be
Open your own,
cool,
do your own business.
do your own thing, and get rid of corporate slavery and all of that. I find that very, very hypocritical and also not practical. I believe that there are people who love working and they're really good at that. People who would perhaps thrive at building their own startups. People who would freelance all their life and they'll be good. And particularly in the 20s, it's so seductive to be in that race. Now, first job by 25, get married by 27, have kids by 29, have a house by 30, have this by 35, da 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 da. This clockwork thing in society is just fueling that. Like they love this. So they're like, ha, 25 tak ye, 27 tak ye, blah, blah, blah. Just drop the pressure of time. Just drop that. Explore in your 20s. It's a fascinating decade. It's the most important decade in your life. You'll make the most meaningful relationships. You'll discover yourself professionally. You'll discover yourself financially. You will be independent truly for the first time in your life. And if you were to live this decade with no pressure on you, but genuinely the joy of exploring who you are as a person and what works for you, what doesn't, you'll set yourself up for life. For life. But that also doesn't mean in the same breath that if you didn't do that in your 20s, your life is over.
Right.
I got my life back at 40. I'm 44 right now, and nearly less than 5 years back, I was a nobody. I just was a glorified startup founder, which, as you very rightly pointed out, looks great on paper, but in actuality, there were just so many things that did not go right in my life, all because of my decisions. And I had to fix that. And I did. So even at 40, I got my life back. So anybody can if I can. But your 20s, if you have that freedom, don't waste it.
Have you met people, I know you've got it all figured out, but have you met people who've become super rich just by investing in mutual funds?
Everybody who is rich is only buying one thing, and that is an asset. So think about what assets do. Assets are earning you money.
Right.
Even when you're not working. So whether people are buying mutual funds, or they're buying real estate, or they're buying gold, or they're creating intellectual property, such as books, or they're building businesses, each one of them is making them money as they sleep.
Right.
And that's the only way to make money.
Passive income. Make your income work for you.
Exactly. Most people, unfortunately, buy liabilities with their money. So they buy a car, they buy a phone, they buy clothes, they buy fancy things to show the world that they are rich. None of that are making them money, they're just buying them status.
Right.
So to answer your question, know of so many people who have insane amount of wealth in just mutual funds. They get crores in just dividend income from the stocks that they own because they've just been sitting on it for so long. In fact, I'm reminded of a fascinating story. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, two good friends. And Bill Gates is asking Warren Buffett, hey Warren, your investing strategy is just so simple. You buy and you hold for a really long period of time and you compound your wealth.
Right.
How come there aren't so many rich people using your investment strategy? And Warren laughs and he says, it's because Bill, nobody wants to get rich slowly. And that's just it. This process is really boring. It is so boring that most people will just opt out. You look at the data in India, the average holding of a mutual fund SIP is less than 2 years. People just opt out.
The moment the market crashes or it becomes lower.
Or even greed. Oh, I can get some better returns out there. I can buy crypto and I can become a millionaire overnight. Or I can just buy that real estate thing and that highway will come up on that front and blah, blah, blah. But none of that will beat the tenacity of just an 18% compounding over
And just hold
10
it.
years.
What is a really long time?
This is a great question because it's almost equivalent to the question of when should I sell? And my answer is never. The answer is never. Or when you need the money. Because what's the right time to hold? The answer is, if you can, please hold for 40 years.
Right.
Because if you held for 40 years, you'll have hundreds of crores. And you would not have even moved a finger to get to that as against trying to trade your way through or build that out. So there is never an answer. The right answer is don't ever sell. Don't ever sell.
If you can help it.
Yeah, if you can help it.
Right. Okay, I want to circle back again to the question that I had asked you, and we'll delve a little deeper and we'll move on then.
Sure.
On social media, there are so many influencers. You can impact a whole generation today, on social media. How much social responsibility do you think influencers have, and do their work with? I know I'm asking you to speak for all influencers,
No,
but
truly.
this is more a general question.
I genuinely believe that it is a position of immense responsibility. But in the same admission, I don't think there is, I shouldn't say that, but I'd like to believe that. I don't think anybody gets up in the morning knowing that they're doing something wrong and yet continue doing it. But that's just my belief. I may be very naive in thinking that way. I believe that everyone in their head is convinced that what they're doing is right.
Right.
And they're justified to do it. And then the choice becomes that of the viewer. They opt in or opt out. And it'll always remain that choice. There will always be high quality content, low quality content. There'll always be high quality entertainment, low quality entertainment. There'll always be high quality literature, low quality literature. And both will always coexist. Like, I would never find any of my books at any intellectual discussions because it's not even written for the discerning reader. It's meant for a generation that hardly reads. So I am in that way a pop culture author. In fact, I tremble at even using the word author for myself. I'm not. I'm just a compiler of content and my experiences, just putting it in the form of a book. And I'm privileged that I can get to do that. But I should not be spending time at any literature fest. You should not be inviting me. There should not be any meaningful conversation. I should just be speaking to my audience, having fun while doing it and so on. Because that's the audience that I cater to. But if anyone wants really fine literature around finance or around anything in life, there are fantastic people out there who will do the same thing. So I do believe that everyone in some way has convinced themselves that they're doing the right thing, and it becomes the choice of the viewer. But then that's also passing the medium and not getting rid of your responsibility. So in the same breath, I'll say influencers bear a very important role because they will shape up the mindset of a generation, if you will. And the words that you choose, the way you conduct yourself is very important. And that's why my benchmark is, would my kids be proud of watching my videos when they grow up? Or would they be embarrassed by the fact that they are my kids? And that becomes a really nice threshold for me to stick in the boundary that I want to set for myself. And I just want to always be myself. Like I love it when people say, oh my God, you're exactly like you are in your YouTube videos. And like, bang, bro, that's exactly who I want to be. I am not another person. I can't even pretend to. It's just such a drain on energy.
Right.
I'm just who I am. And if you like me, great. I'm not trying to impress you. I'm just doing my thing and just seeing who gets impressed.
Right. And I want to discuss the space a little bit more with you on the influencer tag that the media has put, right? Calling influencers who talk about investments and give advice out. It's such a tricky space, and we've seen it. I mean, this. Let's even take it offline, right? When we had the stock markets in India. And there were brokers, there were different stock exchanges at that point. At one point in time, there was not just your NSE, BSE, there were so many stock exchanges. You had penny stocks, you had different scams come up. And then regulation, after regulation sort of came in to make sure that the investor is protected, then investor's money is protected, right? So these were regulations that were needed. Maybe regulation is a bad word in terms of social media at this point in time, free speech, etc. But what I mean is basically to safeguard the interest of a small young investor with 1,000 rupees or 500 rupees in his or her pocket. But on social media right now, the regulations have not come in. It's still sort of an open book, and there are many influencers out there. What do you think is the future for something like this? Because I do understand what you mean. There's all kinds of social content there. It's up to the viewer on what to take and what not to take. But then the entire responsibility is on the viewer, right? We're sort of relegating it only to the innocent viewer. So what do you think the space can be to make sure that we also have some checks and balances other than relying on the conscience of influencer?
I'm very clear on that. So there the two lines of content that have spoken about. One is educational, and second is prescriptive. What I mean by educational is somebody's trying to teach you as a teacher a concept. It could be finance, it could be science, it could be health, it could be fitness. It's a concept. And second is prescription, which is, you know the concept, now do this, buy this, taste this, eat this. That's prescription. That's somebody coming out there and almost putting it out in public that this is the right way to do it, or quote unquote should be the way to do it. I believe that education is very hard to regulate or to determine because it cannot by definition follow a curriculum. You don't even know who you're speaking to. It's such a wide audience out there. The only thing that you want to ensure is that the education is not wrong, but how do you even go about doing that? Because there will never be a way to get this. And then I say, hey, what's our way of determining whether the response from ChatGPT is right or wrong? We don't know. And do we want that to be controlled or go through some sort of a scrutiny? Yes, to some level. But we would want the company themselves to be responsible so that we're not necessarily going through that. Prescription becomes a really, really clear stand. Prescription cannot come from somebody who's not an expert or qualified to do so. And that should be there. The challenge when I think about this is, let's pick up influencers. SEBI has been always very, very clear, hey, this is uncharted territory, we're trying to understand this well, there should be some guardrails, all of which I would fully appreciate. It shouldn't be a license to kill though. What it means is just because I have a SEBI registration doesn't mean that now I can dole out any advice and get away with it. Because that's like a doctor who doesn't follow the moral code
and just goes out
doling medicines that shouldn't be there or prescribing things that are harmful. And just because they're a doctor, they will never come under the scanner. That's not the world you want to live in. So the first step cannot be the last step. If you do put in the guardrails, you have to see it through, because there are enough and more people who will try to beat the system and game it to make their way. And I think that this is evolving. As you very rightly pointed out, we've come a long way from when the NSE started in 92 and now to the fact that it's one of the world's finest exchanges. It takes time. We learn through our mistakes. Same thing is going to happen to social media as well. I think the entire definition of social media, for all you know, will go through such a change. I wouldn't be surprised if 25 years from now, people will be like, we can't believe we allowed that to just happen. Like our kids were just given, unrestricted access to social media? What were we thinking?
Speaking of kids, and you brought them up in the conversation as well, they watch your videos. How much of social media are they allowed? How do they have their own sort of piggy banks, investment portfolios?
Yes. So we have two kids, 12 and 6. 12 Vidur, he's already started investing since 3 years back. So he started investing when he was 9. He does it through us, of course. He doesn't own his own demat, but he just tells us, "Ki mere ye paise dal dena," and he gets a choice on what he has invested in. He has a very clear goal of, by the time he's 18, he wants to get to about 75,000 rupees because he fancies a bike, which I'm sure he'll grow out of by the time he's another 15 or so. I do my bit in trying to teach him finance. So every colony has this Diwali Mela. So we have been putting up a stall for the last 3 years. And every year our goal has to be teach him one principle of the corporate P&L.
Okay.
So starting with revenue, then variable costs, then fixed costs, and then profit. So this year is the profit year. He's already gone through revenue, variable, and fixed costs. He understands that now. And he will hopefully be in a position where he understands profit and get the side of it.
Okay.
From a social media perspective, he's now almost a teenager. So he gets half an hour every day. And so does
just half an hour.
Just half an hour every day. It's screen timed. It's blocked. He runs his own YouTube channel as well. He really likes football. So he's made this football clips channel. So he does spend a fair bit of time in just getting that clips in order and editing it and so on. But it's fascinating to see how kids are just so smart nowadays. But that's the access that they get. No television at home.
No television at home.
Not
no
at
OTT, nothing.
Nothing at all. They don't watch anything.
All right. Ankur, I wanted to ask you, you create so much motivational content, right? What keeps you motivated? Do you get up in the morning and, just before the cameras rolled, you were saying you love the process and the predictability of sort of doing the boring stuff over and over again. You've said it in your videos as well. But what keeps you motivated? What is that one factor?
I think motivation is garbage, and that's what Mel Robbins had beautifully said. I completely adore her, and I think it's such sage advice. We all look for motivation, but it's like the worst friend to be found, because we somehow never need motivation to do the wrong things in life, to eat extra, to sleep extra, to laze around. We somehow, nobody's ever said, hey, I wish I had the motivation to just not do anything. Nobody's ever said that. But we somehow need a motivation to do the right things, and motivation is never to be found then. It's like the hardest friend to seek. And you wouldn't be friends with such a person in real life who always shows up for the show, but is never around when you truly need that friend.
Right.
But we crave for motivation as a true friend. I am a firm believer in discipline. And for me, that works really well. I would any day say, I don't need any sort of motivation if I can get the discipline to do things. And my discipline stems from the fact that I have a very intense measurement of progress built into everything that I do. Everything that I do. So most people are chasing an end goal. They're like, if I go to the gym, I have to look this way at the end of it all. I'm like, I couldn't care less. Am I looking better than who I was yesterday? Am I feeling better than who I was yesterday? If I meditate, am I feeling better than who I was yesterday? If I read, do I know slightly more than what I knew yesterday? If I write, am I becoming a better writer than who I was yesterday? So this very intense, accurate sense of progress built into it, which I sit with myself and get done, just feeds my discipline. And I was like, there's no reason for me not to do it. So a lot of people then ask me, hey, Ankur, we followed this routine and it was working really well for 3 weeks. And then we had this wedding and everything went for a toss and now we can't get back to it. And I'm like, bro, here's the truth. If it was working for you, you would still be doing it. You lied to yourself that it was working for you. You convinced yourself that it was working for you. You tricked yourself into believing that it was working for you. Because if it was working for you, you would still be doing it. Nobody is a fool to quit anything that works for them. So you just have to find ways of how it works for you.
You know, you just quoted that motivation is garbage, right? This thing. And which brings me to my next question on social media, which is, how do you manage to quote the right people and make sure that when you are talking about, say your motivational quotes or what you're saying, it's not something which is picked up from somewhere else, because it's such a thin line. There's books we read, we're talking ultimately to an audience which is not sitting across us. There's a recent controversy with Jay Shetty. There's some questions which have been asked. You face similar situations as well. There have been tweets where, they said, hey, I think this looks like it's picked up from somewhere else. So how do you look at for influencers, plagiarism, and what do you think is really going on out there?
I do believe that if you try to pass off any content as completely yours, then you're a fool of the first order, because we're all standing on the shoulders of others. There is no original thought in the world. There isn't any. It's fancy and fashionable to attribute it to a source because they may have said it, but they also wrest their knowledge and wisdom from somewhere else. What you ought to do, out of respect, because that's the right thing to do, is if you do know the source, then don't pretend that you're the one who came up with it and don't try to impress people. Quote them there. If you don't happen to know the source and somebody tells you or points you in that direction, then own it and attribute it to that. And don't pretend like you're the one who came up with it in the first place. Like, I genuinely feel so baffled when people claim that an idea is theirs. Like, can you claim any original idea in the world? Like, even Einstein did not have original ideas. He rested his theory on so much more that had happened before him. And I only say this because I've studied physics, not because of popular culture. And that's the same thing. Just own up. You are not perfect. You're not meant to fake perfection. And the fairest thing to do and the more honorable thing to do is to own your mistake when you do discover that you've made one.
Okay, own your mistake when you have discovered that you've made one. I want to quickly check in on you that you went from influencer to a motivational speaker to a relationship, if I'm getting it right, to a relationship advisor, which is also a space that you hold. So how are you owning the space and why the relationship space?
I don't attribute any of these definitions to me. And with all due respect, it's not because the research is wrong. I genuinely create content on anything that I find meaningful and I think about or would have reflected on. So I'm a 40-year-old and I'm living in the mind of a 20-year-old, and I'm constantly asking myself, what piece of advice would have truly helped me when I was in my 20s but was never given? Or it was given in a manner that was too complex for me to understand and absorb, and I wish I could break it down and make it simpler. That's the reason for the book, that's the reason for my content, that's the reason for a large part of my social media. Relationships are a very strong part of that. I've had a wonderful relationship with my wife, I've had a wonderful relationship with my parents. We've gone through our ups and downs. I've learned a lot from that. I'm a father today and I'm learning so much about myself through that relationship as well. I've had wonderful friends. There was a time I had plenty, now I have very few, and I love that transition in me. And all of that is, I wish, something that I was told. Like, I wish I was told in my 20s, you know what, it's okay to feel that you can't be friends anymore with your school friends. Don't be guilty and embarrassed of that. Don't be guilty of the fact that you're growing faster than the ones you spent your early years with. Don't feel that you're betraying them if you wish to be somebody else than who they are asking you to be and constantly telling you, bhai tu to badal gaya, tu to badal gaya. These are not conversations that people have. Like, nobody's trained on how to lose friends. There's never a single conversation, particularly in our culture, around losing friends. Because friendship for us is Krishna, Sudama, and Jay and Viru, and all the glorification in pop culture.
A forever concept.
Absolutely. And things like that, right? So whether it's money, whether it's relationship, I have a presence on every platform. And what I find fascinating, which I'm sure maybe you all do in some way as well, people will approach me. Let's say Mehak comes and it's like, hey, I really like your content on LinkedIn. And in that moment, I recognize that how Mehak looks at me is so wildly different from somebody who's consuming me on YouTube. It's not even the same person. It isn't. On YouTube, I'm a teacher. On Instagram, I'm a cool uncle. On LinkedIn, I'm a thought leader. On Twitter, I'm a thinker. On my podcast, I'm a rambler. And in my newsletter, I'm just an expresser. And these personas are so different from each other. They don't overlap. And if one were to just consume one side of that content and that platform, they would have such a different impression of who I am.
They would think that's
just
who
me.
you are.
Yeah. So the relationship guru or the personal finance teacher or the career coach or the life coach or any of those fancy things that they attribute me to. I'm none of that. I'm just a teacher. Like, if you were to ask me, I'm an entrepreneur who loves teaching. That's who I am.
Okay. You've led me to my next question, which is on the entrepreneur.
Sure.
So as an entrepreneur and an investor, what were some of your biggest failures that you can tell us about?
Oh, how much time do you have? I made the classic cardinal mistakes that a first-time founder makes. I over-invested in marketing, thinking that that's the solution to all our problems. I over-indexed on fixed costs, particularly fixed costs that did not have anything to do with customers. So I built a really nice fancy office and I doled out perks and privileges to the entire company. I hired in abundance, anticipating massive growth when it hadn't even hit us. The classic mistakes that one would teach never to do, because of which we suffered, and all because of my decisions and my role as the CEO and founder. We became Nearby in 2015. We raised a really big sum from Sequoia Capital back then, now Peak 15, of $17 million, which was the first check and the biggest check that Sequoia has ever cut as their first check. And in a year, we had run out of money. And we then were also facing a funding winter, so it was really hard to get that money as well. Not that we had the credentials to even raise. I had to lay off 80 people for no fault of theirs, absolutely. And they suffered for the bad decisions that I had made as a founder. We had to cut down on all our costs. We then tried to become profitable. Thankfully, Paytm came along, they invested in us, so we had another life. And then in 2019, we became profitable in 4 years, which incidentally, Brut also did, so I can totally imagine how that feeling would be. And we remained profitable since then. But it's been a very, 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 very different journey from what I'd anticipated. Because I'm like, "Arey, unicorn to kahin nahi hai, aise raaton raat ban jayenge." Didn't happen. It was never meant to happen with the approach that I had and the experience that I had. And I wisened, which is why my latest startup is so dramatically and diametrically opposite to what I've done in the last 15 years. It's bootstrapped, it's no ESOPs, it's fully remote, it's very lean, it's super, super thrifty and lean in its cost structure as well. It's not extravagant, it's making money from day one. And I'm enjoying that journey because I've experienced what the other side has.
Those are some difficult and tough decisions. So thank you for sharing that with us. Now down to my last couple of questions. The viewers would love to know what your daily routine is like.
My daily routine by no measure should be treated as the right routine. It works for me, and I always say that.
I love all the disclaimers.
No, I do, because whenever I share this, people are like, oh, it's so funny. I met somebody literally an hour back. He's like, you've helped me so much with my life, but I can't get that 4:30 a.m. slot for me. I'm like, bro, you don't have to. I'm sure your life is wonderful without getting up at 4:30 in the morning. So I get up really early, between 4:30 and 5. And that happens because I sleep really early. So as a family, we're very early sleepers. Between 9 and 9:30, we're off. And that means saying no to a lot of social responsibility or obligations that I'm happily saying no to for a really long time now. I meditate, I read, I write, then I get my kids ready for school. By the time my wife Ruchi is gone to play tennis, both of us love tennis and we play tennis every day. She comes back and her job is to drop the kids to the bus stop while I go and play tennis then. Then both of us go to the gym. Then I come back, I read the newspaper, which I've been doing for nearly 25 years now, and I still love doing it, and then get ready. So by the time I sit on my desk at about 9:30, I've had nearly 4 to 5 hours to myself doing things that I love doing. And that sets me up for the day, just sets me up for the day. From 9:30 till about 5:30 or so, my day is very fluid. As I said, I don't work very intensely, but I'm thoughtful and deliberate in my work. So I'm reading a lot, I'm thinking a lot, I'm writing a lot, scribbling, replying to emails, having these conversations, these discussions. And then I have only 2 meals a day, one at 11, one at 4. And that's it, day gets over by about 9. And again, reading, wind down.
Lights out at 9:30.
And that's
and weekends too?
Exactly the same routine. Exactly the same routine. There's no difference.
Even on the weekends?
Yeah. There's no weekend, there's no weekday. Like these are all excuses to run away from the life that you hate. I don't like people who live weekend to weekend. You do realize that you have 5 days that you hate about your life, and that's why you desire those too.
My last question is, what are your 3 best investment ideas for a salaried person in India?
Number one, just be disciplined about your money budget. A great rule that I shared in the book is 50-30-20, not my rule. It's spoken about a lot in personal finance. 50% towards your needs, 30% towards your wants or your desires, and 20% towards your investment. Within that investment, be disciplined and automate it. So don't be like, if I have the money, I'll do it. No, just as I said, start an SIP. It's the safest way to make money over the long period. And just number 3, stay invested for long. Market will go through its ups and downs, but over a period of time, it's ridiculous the probability. And just fun fact, Nifty 50, which is India's top 50 companies, if you were to invest in that index for 10 years, the probability that you lose money is 0. There's never been any period in a decade in the history of the NSE where the Nifty 50 has lost money. But people are like, hey, losing money is not what I'm looking for. Make me at least some return. So the probability of you making at least an 8% return is also 100%. 100%. Nifty 50, any 10-year period that you pick up, whether the worst of economic crisis or the best, has delivered at least an 8% and an average of 12% return.
Every decade?
Every decade, year on year. So 12% every year for a decade. That is a really good quality compounding working for you. Far more than you will get as salary increments, far more that your income is going to grow, and of course, far more than inflation. So you have your money growing and protected.
Okay. I'm going to just throw these 3 things at you, the terms, and I just want your take on them.
Sure.
So really quickly, moonlighting.
Desirable. You should definitely consider it. And the law permits it, by the way. So if the company has no problem, please create multiple sources of income.
Burnout.
Very real. And you have only yourself to blame. People choose to stay in conditions that they fully recognize are harmful for them only because it's giving them the safe illusion of safety. Please reconsider. It's not worth it.
Okay. Toxic workplace.
They are very real, largely led by founders and the leaders. culture is a direct representation of the personality of the leader. So if you find yourself in a toxic workplace, it's most likely because the leader is so. Quit and find another place.
Mr. Warikoo, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Absolutely a pleasure. Thank you so much.